Why hello there, and welcome to another tank review. I'm Corny Swiss, and today we're looking at the FV221 Caernarvon, rank 4, 6.7 battle rating British heavy tank. Now, as with all reviews, I'm going to mark, well, what would be the right word? Going to timestamp. God, that's how you can tell it's been a while. I'm going to timestamp the various parts of this review down below, so feel free to click over to whatever you want to watch. I think in this review I'm only going to have one gameplay, but I might have two. I don't know. We'll see. But anyway, the Caernarvon. Now the Caernarvon is a tank that is it was sort of like an in-betweener. There's a lot of similarities between this tank and the Conqueror. But there's also a lot of similarities between this tank and the Centurion Mark III, which is ultimately why ultimately the Centurion Mark III was the more popular of the two, just because it did everything this tank did. So the goal of the Caernarvon really was to try and make a universal hull, trying to make a hull that you could use for armored personnel carriers, for artillery, for tanks, for various other utility vehicles. And it was pretty successful in doing so. It had a lot of fairly substantial off-the-road, terrain negotiation ability, I guess is the best way to say it. Wasn't tremendously fast, because with this big Centurion turret on it, it's just not that fast. It's a very large tank. It's very wide. But thanks to that wide profile, it's able to negotiate terrain fairly well. Now, in War Thunder, this tank is kind of in a sweet spot. Now, up until this point in the British tank line, the heavy tanks have all been slow, with decent guns, a little punchy. The Black Prince has a punchy gun. But once you get to the Caernarvon, the line really, in my opinion, kind of generates a new flavor. This tank has a pretty rapid-firing 84mm gun that, when I got most of the clips for this review, really packed a punch. Less so now, because they've kind of nerfed the sabot shell, which is primarily what I used, honestly, just because I knew it was going to penetrate every time, and the cost isn't enough to make me shy away from that. It's not like a Leopard's heat shell, for example. But all that being said, this tank was really the first non-premium heavy tank that I really, really enjoyed. I liked some of the others, but this one I really, really liked. So let's talk about why. Now, as I said, the Caernarvon is very similar to the Centurion Mark III. Right? It's essentially, you can look at the little stats here. Same gun, same characteristics, same engine. I think it's same engine. Yeah, same engine. My Centurion's not all that well upgraded. But the Caernarvon is wider and is supposed to fit more of the heavy tank profile. They have the same hull armor, same turret armor, so it's not a lot different. And but the Centurion's a little smaller. So there you go. Now, the armor profile of the Caernarvon, the hull is not very good. Okay. You have this front plate, which is 127mm. That's pretty sweet. 220 when it's sloped, but usually 220, depending on what's shooting at you. I guess that's the big thing. You can get some bounces off maybe you can get Tiger 2s can bounce off this. And especially if you're angled, this can become an issue for some tanks. Not all, but some. This lower plate, it's angled well, but it's not all that thick, 76.2mm, so that can become a problem. Hull down, this tank kind of shines. So you have this plate here, right? Well, that's 50mm, but look at that angling. Yeah, no chance. And then you also want to look at this gun mantle, 152mm. Behind it, you have an additional 152mm, meaning that the outside of right next to this gun barrel, kind of on either side of the gun, you have quite a bit of armor. Basically, the gun mantlet is pretty tough, but it can be penetrated. I've had plenty of times where I've been shot through the gun mantlet, but usually against high penetration rounds, like APCR and things like that. And usually they hit right here, kind of plumb, which is essentially the 152 millimeters of armor, give or take. If you're pointing down a little bit, this top plate here becomes very penetratable from enemy tanks, and that can really cause you problems. See how much taller the tank turret is than where the gun mantlet is. So if you angle down slightly, this plate becomes an issue. Other than that, nice thing is that you look at these track pieces. Tracks. I highlighted them before. There you go. Tracks. You got this structural steel, kind of whatever. Side armor, 50.8 millimeters. This thing actually can benefit from angling because you have this steel here. You have the tracks. Tracks are pretty big. And I've had times where a side shot just tracked me. And it seems to happen a little, maybe more often in this tank than others. So angling is certainly something you can do, especially with, a thin lower plate but a pretty tough upper plate relative to it's acceptable upper plate. This can get you a bounce. The front of the turret's pretty fine, so that can get you a bounce too. Side armor, it's not great, but you just have all this extra armor in these tracks, which really can help out. Rear, obviously garbage. Everything will penetrate. Sides, garbage. On the turret, it's garbage. But it's interesting that the rear of the tank is thicker than the sides. It's kind of interesting. But anyway, also to note, there is this strip of 152 millimeters of armor on the cupola. The upper part is 29 millimeters, but this kind of flat part, the only real flat part that gets shown to the front of the tank, is 152 millimeters. So that's pretty good. You can still penetrate this top bit, but at least the flat part is protected, which is nice. Much easier to get a bounce off this than it is to say this. Especially with this part covered, all the red there covered. So the armor profile is good. It's not bad. It's not great, but it's plenty. And this armor profile allows you to be quicker than the previous Churchill tanks. Or all the Churchill tanks, rather. So that's a pretty good benefit. Now, to look at the gun, we have an 84mm 20-pounder Mark I cannon with 65 rounds of ammunition. Rate of fire of about, let me find it really quick. Reload rate 7.3 seconds. That's with a decent crew. Not a great crew, decent crew. Now, the ammunition choice. You have the Shot Mark I. 9.1 kilogram, 1,019 meters per second muzzle velocity, 218 millimeters of penetration at 10 meters, 203 at 500, 176 at 1,500, 163 at 2,000. Basically, any side shot you get is going to penetrate regardless of distance. If you want to penetrate the front of a King Tiger's turret, you can do that. It probably inside, reliably, maybe 700 meters or less. So when you're up close, you can do that. Now, that's probably the toughest shot you'll run into. King Tigers are generally your competition. Now, I prefer the Sabo shell a lot of times, primarily due to the muzzle velocity. It's a 4 kilogram shell, but it gains about 400 meters per second more muzzle velocity. Penetration is obviously higher, and it's exceptionally higher. So I like to use this one because it's not that expensive, and two, the extra muzzle velocity really makes it easy to penetrate the flat parts of the King Tiger's turret, which is a very easy way to disable the tank and knock the tank out. And also, depending on the angles, you can penetrate the upper glacis, you can penetrate the lower plate. So really, there's not a lot he can do with this shell. It's also not that expensive, 390 credits. So if you're hitting your shots, it's not a problem. And with the muzzle velocity, it's fairly easy to do that. Now, I've said it before, this is a 84mm HE shell. Not really worth it. 84mm just doesn't get it done. It's a very high muzzle velocity shell. So it's probably great for taking out AAA, open top vehicles. It'll crush those, but you really don't run into many of those at 6.7 battle rating. It's really more useful for situations you just don't encounter. If you run into those situations, just well-aimed shots with the Sabo or the AP will get the job done. So to me, there's no reason to carry this. You can, but why? You can penetrate everything you run into, most of the time with your AP, but certainly with the Sabo. So there's not really a reason to run around with that. X-Ray, same sort of layout as the Centurion. You have all your ammo in the front right portion. The driver's on the left, front and left, looking at it's dead on. Got the aimer or gunner, loader, commander, 4-person crew. Got ammo basically all below the turret. So hitting the turret is a good way to knock out crew, but not a way to set the tank off. There's no ammo stored in the turret. It's all below the turret ring, really, except for that little bit right there, but it's whatever. Obviously, basically from the turret back is all fuel tanks, transmission, things that'll burst into flames. So, this is where you shoot for a fire. This is where you shoot to blow up the tank, this area. From the front, penetrating this lower plate is kind of devastating. You're going to hit this ammo rack, you're going to hit these ammo racks back here, maybe even this one, probably take out the loader, maybe even the gunner. And if the shell keeps going, it'll hit the engine. So there's a lot of ammo in the way. You're using your ammo to protect your engine, essentially, which is not a good plan. But in the turret, it's really just crew. So a shot to the right part of the turret will take out the loader. To the left, we'll get the gunner and the commander. So that's generally where you want to shoot. It's also important to note, as we said before, this is actually the largest section of turret you want to hit, is to the left of the gun. So that'll take out 2 crew members. So that's probably what you want to do. But yeah, in terms of mobility, it's a 59-ton tank, 810 horsepower, 2,800 RPM, max speed of 34 kilometers an hour, inclination of 41 degrees, visibility 138%. What's all that mean? Basically, this tank is faster than the Churchills, and it gets going it gets up to its speed. It's just not terribly quick, but it's quick enough. It's quick enough to keep up with everything, and it's generally fast. It's most of the time faster than the things that's on its team. So this tank can really get out front and really kind of press the issue more so than Churchills. Churchills would always lag behind, but this tank can really get out front and bring the pain. So without further ado, let's get into some gameplay, shall we? Alright, so here's the first gameplay with the Caernarvon. It's a very old match. It's one of my earlier games. I think this is right after I unlocked the Sabo. Now, the shots, the damage you're going to see is maybe not fully reflective of what's happening right now, but the tactics, the abilities of this tank are similar. Alright, what's that, Tiger 1? Oh, it's Tiger 2, I'm sorry. Ammo rack, done. Well-aimed shots get the job done. That's critical in War Thunder, and especially with this gun, you really can use this ammunition to just pound people and really exert your will upon them. And the gun is rapid firing with good muzzle velocity, so there's really no reason why you can't get your shells on target, even at range. You do have to deal with, standard deviation, variation between each shell, but you have all the tools, and you can keep sending the shells downrange until you eventually hit him exactly where you want to, and he'll blow up. That's how it works. But in this battle, there's all kinds of enemies who are kind of trapped over here. We've taken the high ground. They're going to start, I believe they're going to try and flank around the edge there, but they're hemmed in. They're really not going to be able to go anywhere. We're going to sweep them off this hill this ridge pretty effectively. There goes a Super Hellcat. The tank I still need to get around to do a review on. I have it. I have had some fun playing it. I just need to get around and do a review on it. Oops, spotted something. Oh, he's going to get away, but this guy is not. Engine, radiator, he's on fire. I'm rotating the tank to bring my armor to bear, kind of get angled. It is a 122 millimeter gun, and you can't always guarantee that he's going to put out the fire. Right? So if you don't put out the fire, you can still fire off your shell and then put out the fire. You know, that way you weren't going to be using that. You were going to be reloading during that time anyway. And with that long reload, you know, he's only getting one shot. So he really needs to make it count. Enemy. So we'll have this guy. Ooh, get another one. Bam. IS-1. I think it was, yeah, IS-1. Right through the flat part of the front of the armor, the little driver's hatch. Very easy knockout punch. Now there's an enemy heavy tank up to my right. And ooh, I've seen him on the map there. So I'm going to turn, try and get a line on him, try and deal with him. There he is. Bye-bye. I will say this again, I think I'm probably going to mention this in almost every video. I really need to figure out why my power director likes to freeze the preview video every, I don't know, 20 seconds. It's really annoying. I look at my quote-unquote library for each of these videos, and it's like, you know, a couple video clips and then like 50, you know, little MP3 voice clips. It's incredibly annoying. Maybe I just need to experiment with the preview quality. I just checked, I had it running on full HD, which meant it was beautiful, but I don't know if I need to preview this video in full HD. I did kind of play it, so I do have an idea of what happens. Oh, enemy tank up there. Time to get my turn on. Do. Hello. How are you? Bye-bye. I mean, that was kind of lucky because I couldn't actually see him because the tree was in my way. But sometimes it's good when you're running through foliage to switch to the simulator view just so you can get through the trees faster and see what's on the other side. Or scope. I've actually switched my preview quality back to full HD because it makes no difference. So there you go. I'll get to the bottom of it someday. But that day is not today. There's an enemy tank across the way there that I really want to try and get a shot on. But it's just not going to happen. He's hiding out. And I feel like the teammates are probably going to get to him. But it doesn't hurt to investigate. I think it's probably that AI. Yeah, it's in an AI spot. That KV1 I looked at but didn't shoot. I think that's just an AI. But we've kind of trounced him. We've kind of run him over. Yeah, not much to say about that. The big advantage of the Caernarvon over the most of the tanks we ran into is the gun. This gun, the rate of fire means that if you get the first shot and you get any type of disabling hit on them, they're toast. You know, your second shot's going to be on the way before their crew can switch. It's really important that the reload is under 8 seconds. It's very close to 7 seconds because you won't, like, let's say you knock out a driver and a gunner. Well, you want to hit them again before they're able to drive away, right? If you've hit their gunner, you want to be able to fire again before they can get their gunner back and shoot you. You know, there's a lot of benefits to being able to get another shot off before their crew's ready to either return fire or drive away. And especially when that's all combined with a high velocity 84mm gun, that's good. Can deal with that. And I'll take that every day. This tank's also pretty adept in reverse. It's not the fastest, but it certainly gets the job done. And that's kind of what you look for in a tank. You know, I feel like a lot of times, I've said it before, I would normally trade armor for a good gun and speed. Even decent speed and a great gun. There's 3 things a tank needs. It needs, you know, speed, armor, and a good gun. Well, the problem with armor is armor and speed are inversely related. As one goes up, the other goes down, usually, like 90% of the time. Gun is independent of the three. So in War Thunder, where armor really plays less of a factor because most things can penetrate just about everything, speed is becomes the most important of those two. And since the gun is dependent, having a great gun and good speed is sweet. And that's something the Caernarvon really tries to do, because the Churchills for a while have traded armor have taken the armor over the speed, and then had a decent gun. That's great and all, but it's the less effective of the two in terms of War Thunder. Now, for what the Churchills were designed to do, perfectly fine, right? They're designed as infantry tanks. You don't really care if that tank can keep up with an advancing column of armor, because it's not designed to do that. It's designed to support infantry. So you want it to kind of keep up with the infantry. Now, the Caernarvon is supposed to be more of a universal, sort of a main battle tank, a heavy tank, a universal tank, really. So it needs to be able to push the issue and be faster than the infantry and bring to bear that punch that you need against other armored targets. And, it's a good combination of the two. Now, it's important to note, I haven't actually played the Caernarvon yet. I've test driven it, or not the Caernarvon, I'm sorry, the Conqueror. I'm sure the comment section is going to be like, he hasn't even played this tank. No, I have played this tank. No, the Conqueror, I've only test driven the Conqueror, and to me, and based on what I've heard and seen, I think the Conqueror honestly isn't as good as the Caernarvon, primarily because of the battle rating. The 120mm gun's great, but it's like needles, right? You'd expect more punch out of a 120mm gun. But, I'm sure I'll see when I get there. It's the Centurion's gotten, or not Centurion, God, the Conqueror's gotten some buffs since it was introduced, if I remember right. So that'll be interesting. But let's go ahead and move on to a clip you've seen before, but it illustrates my points. So it's a recycling, but it illustrates points, so I'm going to do it. Sorry. Alright, so this clip is from my previous War Thunder video. It's the latter half of a battle I played in the Tortoise and the Caernarvon. This is sort of about the armor. This is one of the better examples of the armor I can give, because it's, one of the few times playing this tank I've actually taken consistent return fire. This Panther is rolling around over here. My first shell goes in, sets him on fire. He hits my tracks. It's kind of the benefit. He didn't have time to really aim the shell because he was just trying to get it off. And the result is I have a big meaty track section to my vehicle, and not a lot he can do. It's a King Tiger over there. Just wasted one of my guys. I have the Sabo loaded, which is, I think, the appropriate shell here. Goofy bounce there, but there you go. He got a shot off into my gun mantlet. And then I return fire into his and kind of wrecked him. The reason I like the Caernarvon a lot more than, say, the King Tiger is, to me, the gun performs similarly, if not slightly better, in my experience. And the turret front is, granted, the King Tiger has a very well documented weaker portion of the turret, the flat parts, but the Caernarvon to me, the turret seems maybe a little more durable, because people aren't used to shooting it, but it seems to me like it's just generally more difficult to deal with, and I think that's valuable. Basically, I prefer the Caernarvon survivability over the King Tiger. Here's another one. Shell into the side of the turret. I mean, this is all rehashed, so I'm gonna stop before too long and go to the final opinion. But You know, something to note. I think the armor profile is fine. It's good, but the most optimal way to play in War Thunder is to avoid getting shot. Never take return fire. So putting yourself in a position where you just never get shot at is the way you win and do well. So I think focusing on positioning is better than focusing on armor, if that makes any sense. So anyway, let's move on to the final opinion, shall we? Alright, so opinion time. What do I think of the Caernarvon? I really like the Caernarvon. I think this is the first really potent tank in the British tank line, or the heavy tank line rather. The Churchills are all just kind of too slow. They have their ability to angle really well, which translates into some impressive displays of tanking. But the Caernarvon just brings extra pain. It's faster, and the armor profile is good enough, if not, better than above average. It's the armor profile is plenty, and the gun is plenty. So you combine that with a fast platform to carry all that. Well, I say fast, pretty quick. You have a very potent tank, and this is, in my opinion, one of the easier tanks to really wrap your hands around. Primarily due to the speed and the rate of fire. The rate of fire makes it really easy to really pin guys down and take it to them. So I think this is a very very friendly tank to a new driver or someone who's not used to driving. If like the first tanks you drove were British heavy tanks, and then all of a sudden you jump in the Caernarvon after playing your Churchills, I don't think it's that hard to make the transition. It's quicker. It's just better. So there's not a lot of it's like you have some of the ability you had with the Churchill in terms of being able to survive, but now you have a faster platform with a better gun. So what's there to complain about? So I really like it. It's good. It's a good tank. Certainly worth researching. Certainly worth playing. And a tank that, if you were looking to talisman something, I think Caernarvon's not a bad choice. I like it a lot. Important to keep in mind ammunition nerfs, but even with recent ones, I think the Caernarvon is still pretty good. You may just have to aim a little better, but the shells penetrate everything, so that's good enough for me. But anyway, I want to thank you guys for watching this watching this review. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, please put them down in the comments section. I'll be more than happy to read them. And hopefully I can bring another one very soon. So, anyway, thanks for watching. I've been Corny Swiss. I'll see you next time.